name is Robin DiPietro, and I am a program coordinator for OneOp. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's session, Inclusive Strategies for Attention and Motivation. In case you're joining us for the first time, I'd like to give you a brief tour of our webinar platform so you can find your way around. Hopefully, you are currently able to view the slides that we're sharing. If you're unable to see them or have any other difficulties, please email us at contact@oneop.org for tech support. As some of you have already done, we look forward to having you join us in the chat pod for conversations and questions. To embed the chat pod so you don't miss any links or conversations, simply place your cursor over the shared slides. You'll then see a toolbar pop up across the bottom of your screen. From there, just click the chat bubble icon. When typing questions or comments, please be sure to select everyone from the response options drop-down menu so that everyone is able to view them in the chat pod. Note that the slides and resources are available for download on the event page for today's session. We'll be covering continuing education information at the end of the webinar, so please stay tuned if you're interested in continuing education credits or a certificate of attendance. Thank you for joining us as we continue our partnership with the Department of Defense and the U.S. Department of Agriculture to expand the readiness, knowledge, and networks of the professionals supporting our military service members and their families. The views expressed in this presentation do not necessarily reflect the official policy of the Defense Department, U.S. Department of Agriculture, U.S. government, or OneOp. The mention of any entity or product is for informational purposes only. Today we have with us Carly Wolf. She is a special education teacher and received her master's in special education as an intervention specialist with a focus on academic coaching and leadership from the University of Northern Colorado. She received her bachelor's degree in elementary and special education from the University of Delaware. Shortly after graduating from the University of Delaware, Carly moved to Boulder, Colorado, where she started her teaching career as a special education teacher. Before I turn things over to Ms. Wolf, you may want to be sure you have a copy of the slides that can be found at the bottom of the webinar event page under Event Materials. A link to this page will be placed in the chat momentarily. At this point, I will mute my microphone for Ms. Wolf to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Robin. Hi, everyone. So great to have all of you here. Before I dive into our content today, I'll share some objectives and then check in with some questions to gather what you would hope to receive from this webinar. So our objectives today are for participants to understand how neurodiversity, including ADHD and executive functioning challenges, impacts learning, behavior, and motivation. You'll learn to apply subtle changes in structure and environment to improve time management and incorporate social emotional learning strategies to reduce stress and improve cognitive stamina. So what I would like to hear from you, please think of a student or two who you'd like to be able to better support and some of the greatest challenges that you face in supporting them. Thinking about what do you hope to learn about and walk away with from this webinar that might help you with this. So feel free to pop some things in the chat to help frame your thinking and mine as well for our session this morning. Maybe you have something in mind that you want to hold with you as we do this learning together. Okay, so what is ADHD? Until 1987, ADHD was known as Attention Deficit Disorder, or ADD. Now, before I get more into the definition, what are some things that we used to call these kids? And let's get real with it. Feel free to pop some things in the chat. What did we used to call these kids in the classroom? Yeah, maybe hyper disruptive. What else? Busy. I often hear things like annoying, class clown, spacey, right? Undisciplined. Absolutely. Now, does anyone know what this was called before it was ADHD or ADD? It's actually called MBD or minimal brain disorder. That one always hurts, right? The name of this disorder, though, still doesn't quite make sense. Not all kids are hyperactive, etc., which you'll hopefully come to see by the end of this session. I also don't always consider this necessarily a disorder, which you'll hopefully begin to see why. So, what is ADHD? It is characterized by developmentally inappropriate levels of attention, impulsivity, and in some cases, hyperactivity. There must be several noticeable, inattentive, or hyperactive impulsive symptoms evident in two or more settings present prior to age 12. Now, why is that two or more settings piece important? Well, let's say that you only have a view of the student in the classroom or only have a view of a student at home. Without seeing how they present in multiple settings, there could be something else going on. There could be some environmental factor that's leading to the challenges that we're seeing. There are many reasons why a student might be showing up differently in different settings. Parents may say, "Oh, they're having a hard time," and then you don't see it in the classroom, or it might be the opposite. There's many reasons why this can be going on, but for that ADHD diagnosis, it has to show up in multiple settings. There also must be clear evidence that the symptoms interfere with or reduce the quality of social, academic, or occupational functioning. Additionally, approximately 9.8% of children ages 2 through 17 years of age have at some point in their young lives received a diagnosis of ADHD, according to parent reports. And the rate for boys is higher than that of girls. Now, 9.8% of school-aged children. That's why I'm so grateful that you're all here. Whatever setting that you might be in working with kids, and even if a child is receiving special education services and you're in a classroom setting, right? The majority of cases, they're spending most of their time in the gen ed setting. And 9.8%, that means that every classroom is going to have at least one child who's impacted by ADHD. And so it's so important that all classroom teachers and anyone who works with kids is learning more about this. ADHD is largely hereditary. 40% of children with ADHD have at least one parent who has ADHD and 30% who have a sibling with ADHD. Now, why does this matter? The teacher says, "Please help your son with this." Parent might be thinking, "Well, who's coming home and helping me?" It's also a chronic disorder. 75% continue to have symptoms into adulthood. Some might outgrow it or choose a profession or a spouse that helps them manage or compensate for their challenges. But 75% do continue to have those symptoms into adulthood. Now, ADHD is real. Okay, we can see it in the brain. Now, I will never actually suggest spending the thousands of dollars to get a brain scan because a good diagnostic workshop will help you get the information that you really need. But imaging studies do show the difference in the structure and activity between brains of people with and without ADHD. The loading and releasing of neurotransmitters dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin in the brain's prefrontal cortex is inconsistent for people who have ADHD. These are the neurotransmitters that continue to things such as maintaining alertness, increasing focus, and sustaining thought, effort, and motivation. The prefrontal cortex, that front part of the brain, is thinner and matures more slowly. But don't worry, That doesn't mean the brain is any less capable. I'm going to say that again. This doesn't mean the brain is any less capable. Additionally, we know that there is an understimulation in the reward and motivation centers of the brain. Any aha moments you might be getting here? Anything that you have tried and tried again with some of these students that just don't quite work, right? Some of those motivation strategies don't always work, like the rewards or sticker charts in the same way that might benefit with other kids. So, what is executive function? Now, executive function is the set of mental skills or processes that allow us to use our intelligence and problem-solving abilities to help us work towards achieving our goals. It's located in the prefrontal cortex, again, that front part of the brain. This is the last part of the brain to develop, and it's typically developed by 25 to 30 years of age. Now, consider here for a moment all of the big life decisions that individuals are expected to make before 25 to 30 years of age, before their prefrontal cortex is fully developed. Now, we're going to talk a bit here about executive functioning, and then I'm going to go back and show you the relationship between ADHD and executive functioning. So the first skill that we'll talk about here is initiation and activation. Now, I'm going to be showing you 8 executive function skills. You might hear some professionals talk about 5 or 10, or even talk about them as hot or cold skills. Now, in the fields of ADHD and executive functioning, it is agreed upon what we mean by executive function, but it's not in the DSM. It's not in the diagnostic manual. You cannot be diagnosed with executive dysfunction. You can measure it, you can assess it, but it's not a diagnosis. Now, notice the word skills that we have up in the corner here. These are just like learning to read, write, etc. They are skills. Now, if I've already taught someone how to read and they're struggling, I'm going to help them. I'm going to bring an intervention. Same thing is important to support with these executive function skills. Rather than just repeating our expectations, we need to support students with education, with supports, accommodations, and modifications. Say it's January and a student is still not lining up as we've set the expectation for. Now, what emotion might that teacher be feeling? Probably some frustration. But what if we recognize that initiation is a skill? Then we have the opportunity to go into some problem solving. So let's talk about some skills here and strategies. Ready, set, go, but how? To do this, we need a structure, a strategy, and a routine. These are the things that become innate and become natural for us over time. But for students, especially those who struggle with initiation and activation, we need to start by breaking it down and supporting them to build this structure, strategy, and routine. This is a note about a resource that can be done for parents around how do we get started? Because parents really need that support too. Okay, our next executive function skill is working memory. Now, if you're taking notes here, I would suggest circling, starring this, whatever it is, because working memory, I think, creates one of the greatest challenges for kids with ADHD. In testing reports, you'll very often see that their working memory is weaker. So what is working memory? Working memory is the mental workspace where we temporarily store, retain, recall, and manipulate information. It's the thoughts, facts, and ideas. So there are 3 types of memory, right? There's short-term memory, like I need to go to the store and get milk, cheese, and eggs. There's our long-term memory, like I remember my childhood phone number. And then this is our working memory. It's our brain's search engine. It requires that you hold your thoughts in your mind, that you manipulate your thoughts, and it's needed to plan and carry out thoughts, actions, and behaviors. It manages both the receptive and expressive aspects of communication and we also have to manage remembering and integrating characters, plots, details for reading comprehension. Additionally, working memory is sensitive to anxiety, stress, and pressure. Do you ever notice that your working memory is weaker when you're under stress? Maybe if you have a lot going on, you find it helpful to write a list of all the things that you need to do because it's hard to hold it in your working memory when we're under a lot of stress and pressure. So consider how that impacts our students. And additionally, working memory is often weaker for those who have ADHD. Okay, here's our third executive function skill, planning and organizing. This is the creating and prioritizing order and structure. Planning requires a sense of time. The ability to estimate the passage of time is weaker for people with ADHD, and it does not improve when on ADHD stimulant medication. Does anyone know someone, or maybe it's yourself, who's always late and always surprised? Or someone who's always rushing you, but you're thinking, we've got plenty of time. Their internal clock is not always accurate. This is one of my favorite tools. It's called a time timer. This is an example of a visual timer. And the way that it works is that red little area, you're moving that dial down. You could spread it across up to 60 minutes to show how much time. So say, for example, we have 15 minutes for this activity. I can set my time timer for 15 minutes, and then that red section will slowly tick away over those 15 minutes, and then there's just a soft little ding at the end. This is a great way to help students start to understand and feel that passage of time. In my classroom, I teach in a resource setting where I have a small group of students, and I always have a big time timer behind me, behind my teaching table. And I always set this when students come in to show them how long that we'll be working together. Without fail, students ask me to set the time timer if I forget to. It's really comfortable for them and helps to reduce a lot of anxiety from what I notice when they can start to understand what the passage of time feels like. Whenever we're going to give someone a time-oriented task, we should give them something to measure the passage of time with. Some other tools I love are simple sand timers. I have an array of different times of sand timers in my classroom that I'm constantly using for little tasks. And again, students really connect with that and ask for it. Now, it is not, with ADHD, it's not an inattention to the moment, it's inattention to the future. There's a saying that goes in the world of ADD, there are only two times. There is now and there's not now. Or if tomorrow's the due date, then today is not the due date. I have a test on Tuesday. The student's thinking, why should I care about that now? It's only Friday, the week before. Why are we talking about this? Planning a future event requires being able to anticipate the future. But here's what we know about kids' ability to anticipate the future. So from 3 to 5 years of age, they say that kids can anticipate 5 to 20 minutes in the future. And here are some more statistics on this. So if I am going to take my child, my 5-year-old kid to Disney World, and I say, okay, we're going to go to Disney World next week. What is the kid going to ask? Are we going now? Is it time to go now? They really can't feel and anticipate time in the same way that we do. So what we need to do is help children and students gradually shift from needing external controls and immediate feedback to utilizing internal controls and being able to accept delayed feedback and support them along the process. Next is processing speed. This is the time that it takes to process and respond. Processing speed is the speed of completing a task. It's the responding, reflecting, reacting with reasonable accuracy. There are three types of processing speed. There's visual processing. This is how quickly our eyes perceive information and relay it to the brain. There's verbal processing, like how quickly we hear a stimulus and react to it. And then there's motor speed, how quickly we respond to a motor task. Effective processing speed requires motivation, regulation of emotions, and motor coordination if there's a motor task involved. Now, remember when I said that the reward and motivation centers of the brain are not as activated, right? And regulation of emotions, we will get to that shortly, the challenges with that. But just for as for working memory, processing speed is also sensitive to anxiety, stress, and pressure. Now, in a kindergarten class, how do the kids know who the quote unquote smart kid is in class? Probably the one who's quickest to raise their hand, right? Now, say I'm the teacher, and I'm going to point to the little circle on the screen that you see here, and I might ask, okay, kids, who knows what shape this is? And a student raises their hands, it's a circle. And I say, okay, good. Now, what's the shape inside? But now let's think about my slower processor. They might be thinking, oh, it's blue. That's my favorite color. Or I guess here it's purple. Purple, it's my favorite color. Oh, and I know what shape that is. That's a circle. Oh, and I see a triangle inside. I just learned about those. Those are exclamation points. Okay, the teacher said, what shape is that? Okay, now, did this student raise their hand? Probably not. But did they have all of the knowledge? Maybe even more than their peers? Absolutely. But what do they start to think about themselves? That they're not smart. But here's the thing, there is no relationship between speed and intelligence. Some of the most intelligent people that we know speak very slow and deliberately, or some speak too quickly. There is no relationship between speed and intelligence. But wow, don't we start to make our students feel like there is? Additionally, processing speed is often weaker for individuals with ADHD. Talk a little bit more about processing speed. Now, say you're going on a hike with a group of friends, something that we often do here in Boulder, Colorado. Now, I'm going at a slightly different pace, slightly slower pace than some of the rest of the group ahead of me. Now, what will often happen is those in the front will occasionally take a break if they're coming up to a turn or they see a beautiful view they want to take a picture of. And so they'll pause, make sure that we don't get too far behind and wait for those lagging behind to catch up. That person in the back is seeing them ahead and they're seeing them chatting, maybe having a snack, enjoying the view, and they're so excited for that break. They're working really hard, maybe harder than those up front, and they need that break. But what happens when they catch up to the rest of the group? They keep going. Oh, you finally caught up. This is how our slower processor feels all day long. These students don't get the same downtime to replenish or enjoy. And here's the thing, you cannot at this time increase someone's processing speed. But what we can do is help to reduce the factors that may slow it down. So here's where I would love to hear from some of you. How do you see processing speed impact the work that you do with students or children? Think of some examples in the classroom. How do you see students with slower processing speed be impacted? Feel free to pop some things in the chats. I'm seeing kids might miss instructions or steps. Yeah. They fall behind or they rush through without trying to keep up. Thank you. Maybe they shut down and don't attempt to answer. Absolutely. That pattern can happen over time. They're learning that. Maybe they become frustrated because everyone else seems to finish something so quickly. Absolutely. Someone shares, my daughter who has ADHD rushes the assignment rather than truly trying to understand the expectation. And as a result, they might miss out on the opportunity for further learning. There are youth that want to move faster with the lesson or activity. They could become frustrated, and the same with those who are processing slower. Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of frustration. Absolutely. Feelings of overwhelm. Maybe they give up if they see others are done. Yeah. Maybe they avoid participation or completing the assignment. Why should I bother getting started if I know it's going to take me longer? I know I'm used to having these feelings of frustration and overwhelm, right? When needing to respond as a whole group, even if it's on dry erase board, they will usually use the time given to answer to actually process the instructions, often results in a meltdown or giving up. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you all for sharing those. So considering with that, I'll go back here for a moment. Considering with that, then what can we do instead? So let's take that example of whiteboards. Something I've certainly done in a classroom, right? Write your answer. Here's a math question. Write your answer on a whiteboard. How can we support that student with slower processing speed to still have that opportunity to do the learning, to do the work, and to show their knowledge to themselves and to the teacher? Maybe we can provide additional lag time. Don't hold your board up as soon as you have your answer, but as once you have your answer, just keep it down. I might scan the room, see when everyone's had a chance, and then, okay, everyone hold your boards up now. There's lots of little changes that we can make to support those slower processors and give them a chance to feel the intelligence that they truly do have. Okay, let's get into our next executive function skill, which is attention. Now, is an ADHD a deficit of attention? Well, not quite. It's a deficit in the ability to pay attention. And that's very different. It's like you're watching TV, but you're listening to five channels at the same time. Now, which one are you listening to? Probably the one that's most interesting, which unfortunately is not always the classroom teacher. So people can pay attention, but not always when they need to, for as long as they need to, or on what they need to. It's not that they're unfocused, but they're multi-focused. We also have hyper-focused when there's something of high interest. Do you have any students who could read, play Legos, or draw for hours? Now that's hyper-focus. But do you see that that's the same issue? They're not able to regulate what they're paying attention to, which is why transitions are often really hard. When students with ADHD are faced with tasks that they consider boring, repetitive, or uninteresting, they find it difficult to pay attention, especially without intrinsic rewards or motivator. It's often not laziness or willful disrespect. Rather, it's an inability to regulate their emotions or regulate their attention, sorry. Now let's talk a little bit more about transitions. So there are three steps of transitioning. It involves first stopping the activity, then moving towards the new activity, both cognitively and or physically, and starting a new activity. Now, which of these do you think that kids often have the hardest time with? Typically, it's stopping. But as teachers, what do you think we tend to spend the most time focusing on? Starting. But maybe we need to actually spend a few extra minutes helping them stop. But why do kids have such a hard time stopping? Well, maybe it's a preferred activity. Maybe they're anxious about not being able to finish or having time later. Or maybe they finally just got started after having such a hard time getting started. And now they have to stop. How about those do now activities? Like a quick activity right when you come in the classroom. What can be some problems with these? And maybe some better alternatives. Say it's a quick task right when you come in, and then you have to turn it in. Well, what about that student who has a slower processing speed? They need a bit more time to get settled, to transition in. Can it be something that they don't have to turn in? Right? So that student doesn't feel that they have this constant piling list of things that they just couldn't get to when they were really trying their best. So what we know is that each step may need to be addressed separately, right? These are different skills. Attention is more than just listening. Attention is three-dimensional. It involves noticing everything around you and being able to filter out what's not timely, relevant, or helpful to pay attention to. You must also keep in mind what you saw or heard as it relates to what you're currently experiencing. Additionally, you have to be able to manage your emotions so that you can keep a cool head and not overreact to frustrations, excitement, etc. But can't they just sit still and pay attention? Not always. But activity can help stimulate the networks of the brain that control attention, therefore increasing the levels of the neurotransmitters dopamine and norepinephrine in the way that ADHD medications do as well. Things like focus tools or fidgets, movement, music, doodling, and chewing can all be helpful. We're going to talk about fidgeting in a moment. What about things like alternative seating or preferential or yeah, things like alternative seating, right? Can we allow students to sit on the floor with a lap desk if they're doing independent work? The image of the chair with the yellow, blue, and red is a tool that I love in my classroom. It's called a hug a chair, and it's what's cool about it is the wooden panels kind of wrap around the kids. They're getting some feedback. It could be a great calming tool or just a nice helpful focus tool. And the standing desk. Standing, it doesn't have to be like a nice fancy standing desk. It can be simple as putting a cardboard box on top so they have the opportunity to stand up. Okay. Now let's talk about preferential seating for a moment. Now, what does preferential seating usually mean? If you receive an IEP or a 504 that says a student receives preferential seating, what do we assume? Typically the front of the room, right? But that's not always what's best for these students. Chances are they know why they're sitting there. Maybe they're feeling embarrassed, maybe stressed. And so what's happening with their ability to learn? Right? What did we learn? What happens when there's stress and pressure happening in the brain? Working memory is weaker, processing speed is weaker. It's harder to learn. Now, sometimes front of the room by the teacher is what's best for students, but maybe they prefer to sit over to the side or towards the back of the room where they're not feeling the pressure of other students looking at them. But what the best way that we can really know is actually by asking them, hey, where do you want to sit? What do you find works best for you? But the key with that is to follow up with, how will we know it's working? And let's check in a week or two and see how it's going. My goal is not just that he's going to work for me in my class. He's probably never going to have me again. I want him to be able to take care of his needs wherever he goes into the world. And so to help him self-identify what works best for you and learn how to advocate for that. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about fidgeting. If I'm going to give a student a fidget, I can't just give them a fidget and expect them to use it appropriately to help them focus. I need to first teach them about fidgeting. And this can happen at any age, just using developmentally appropriate language. So I talk about the difference between a fidget and a toy. A fidget is my secondary focus. If I'm paying attention to you, you are what's important right now. My eyes are on you. My attention is with you. I might have a fidget that's in my lap that I'm playing with back and forth. That's my secondary my fidget is my secondary focus. It's in the background of my attention. But say I put my fidget in front of my face, I have this like bendy stick, and I'm thinking, ooh, I wonder if I can make this into a cool shape, like a pretzel. And that's no longer my secondary focus. It's now become my primary focus. It's in front of my vision. I'm no longer paying attention to you, to what's important, right? Now, fidgets might not always be best for all students, but by giving them the opportunity to understand when it's a fidget or a toy, we can give them the opportunity to use it appropriately. Now, another way that I'll demonstrate this when I'm teaching this in person is I might slam my fidget on my desk and I'm still talking to you, and you hear this loud noise in the background of my fidget slamming on my desk. Now, it's working really well for me. I'm still paying great attention to you. But what's the problem here? I'm distracting everyone else around me. So we need to teach kids about appropriate fidgeting. The way that I do this in my classroom is I have a fidget bin of a variety of different tools, and it's at the front of my room right by the door. And students know that when they come in my classroom, as they're walking in there, welcome to grab a fidget and take it over to their seat, as long as they follow our expectations and boundaries around fidgets, meaning that they're using it as a fidget and not as a toy. I start off, of course, by teaching about fidgeting. I'll pull out my bin with my students and I will talk them through in a similar way that I just did with all of you. I'll give them a chance to touch and feel the different tools that I have and talk about how they might work well for different kids and at different times. So if I have a fidget that there's this one that I love with a little marble in it, and it's this mesh, and I slide the marble from side to side. But we'll talk about this is a really great one. It helps me focus on when I'm listening to my teacher, but probably not best if I'm doing a writing assignment where I need at least one of my hands. So, what's a fidget that's going to help me and benefit me at different times, right? Now, my students know that when they choose to come in with a tool or come in with a fidget, that they have to follow these expectations. Now, if I tell you to put it away, it's not that it's a punishment, it's just not working for you right now. The beauty that I find with this, and as kids young as kindergarten, is they really do start to self-identify when they need a fidget and when it's just not benefiting them. And okay, I'm going to go put it away. I notice that I'm using it as a toy. And you can bet that the first 2 weeks after I present my fidgets, every kid is going to pick a fidget every time. We're going to have quite a bit of putting them away. But over time, they truly will start to self-identify that. So I challenge you to give it an opportunity. Give kids the chance to see if fidgeting can help them focus. Okay, let's talk about more impact of attention challenges. We each vary in our ability to regulate how well we attend to what we want and need to pay attention to. Sometimes maybe we're just too tired or we're too stressed. Sometimes we might just not be interested. When a person's ability to regulate how well they can pay attention impacts them across a variety of situations and settings, this may be a sign that they have ADHD. Okay, our next executive function skill is flexible thinking. So what is flexible thinking? Now, this is the ability to shift gears and find new ways to solve problems. People who struggle with flexible thinking often have trouble coping with change. They often get stuck and they don't understand why. They may have trouble accepting other people's ideas. They might argue the same point over and over, or get frustrated when even small things go wrong. They might repeat the same mistakes continuously, or struggle to follow new schedules. They may get anxious or angry when plans change, or struggle with unfamiliar or more complicated tasks. All right, I'm wondering, Robin, if this is a good time to check in if there's any questions in the chat.
Sure. I haven't seen any, but
Okay.
there's lots of good comments and conversation happening, so that's great. If you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we will address them kind of in the moment, or hold them till I can also keep track of them and hold them till the end. So both work if people have questions.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. All right, so let's talk about our next skill here, emotional regulation. Now, this possibly creates one of the greatest challenges for our kids. It's the ability to understand and accept their emotional experience, manage their emotions, and respond with appropriate behavior for the moment. People who have weak emotional regulation can be emotionally impulsive and may have a hard time with things like inhibiting their reaction to a response, with modulating or monitoring their level of anger and expression of raw emotion. Now, this is not a mood disorder. There's nothing wrong with their emotions. Rather, it's their ability to regulate them. It's like their emotions are spilling out, and we need to help them learn to regulate their emotions. They may have a hard time with being patient and delaying gratification, with tolerating boredom or frustration, with refocusing their attention away from an event or towards an event that might encourage a more positive and acceptable mood. At the core of ADHD is a deficit in emotional regulation. As a result, people with ADHD may appear highly sensitive and overreactive. So much so that Russell Barkley, one of the leading experts in the field of ADHD, wanted to rename this DER, or deficits in emotional regulation. Okay, emotional regulation has a huge impact for those with ADHD. And next we have self-monitoring. This is our last of the 8 executive function skills. It's that internal conversation we have. Now, keep in mind that this is a developmental skill, as these all are. So, improving self-talk is the key to helping people build executive function skills. So, what can we do to help? We live our life out loud. Say that you have a lesson plan written. Have you ever ripped it up because you realize in the moment it just wasn't going to be a good way to teach the lesson? What if you told your kids this? Kids tend to just see us as complete, as being able to do all these things. So we want them to know that we go through this process ourselves. We want them to know what an external process it really is. So let them hear you. Let them hear your thinking process, your steps, your reasoning, the how, when, why, and where, and the what. Okay, So we talked about our 8 executive function skills. See right now on the right that it says um, sorry, we say this is the board of directors that helps you do what you decide to do. Okay, we think of this as the CEO of the brain or the orchestra conductor. Now, if we think of this as the CEO of the brain, and we teach kids that they're the CEO of the brain and their brain has all these different kinds of managers, then maybe they don't have to feel so badly about themselves when we say, oh, it looks like your planning and organizing manager might need some new strategies. It can be really empowering, right? Now, executive functions have been found to be more predictive of academic and career success than socioeconomic status or IQ. But the good news is that executive function skills can be improved. So, what is the relationship now between ADHD and executive function? ADHD is a developmental impairment of the brain's executive function. People who have ADHD may be as much as 30% or 3 to 5 years delayed in developing their executive function skills. This delay has nothing to do with their level of intelligence. However, it can make learning and performing very challenging and frustrating. Let's talk for a moment about ADHD in girls and women. I noted that we have a higher percentage of boys who are diagnosed with ADHD. Now, women tend to display more inattentiveness rather than hyperactivity and impulsivity. So symptoms are less likely to be observed in the classroom setting. So it may be possible we actually have an underdiagnosis. Women with ADHD may develop better coping strategies than males to mask their symptoms. Women are also more likely to internalize their symptoms and become anxious, depressed, leading to a missed or incorrect diagnosis. And if not properly diagnosed or treated, girls with ADHD can experience the same negative consequences as boys, including poor academic performance and behavioral problems. There are many girls and women who have a diagnosis of ADHD or and maybe have just assumed until they got the diagnosis that they just have anxiety or depression. But without that true diagnosis, they may not have the tools and strategies that could have really benefited them. I think that how you conceptualize yourself is so important. If you think of yourself as depressed or anxious or bad at something, you're likely going to operate out of those eyes. And remember, it's never too late to get a diagnosis if you're sitting here feeling like that. Know that we have coaches with PTS coaching who work with parents and coaches who work with adults in their role as well. Also note that all of this may also be true for our inattentive boys. Okay. Now, don't be afraid to take breaks for students in the classroom. We know is that breaks help boost learning. What happens is that the neurotransmitters needed for memory construction and attention are depleted after as little as 10 minutes of doing the same activity. Brain breaks let the brain chemicals replenish. Breaks can be simple, like stretching, singing, jumping, or changing the learning activity up. What happens is that after just a few minutes, their refreshed brains will be ready for new memory storage. There are tons of different ways that we can give kids quick, simple breaks. Here's just a few examples of ways to give breaks, and I'll go through a few of them. But it can be a full break, like taking a stretch or doing some wall push-ups, where we're just putting our hands on the wall, right? And doing some push-ups there. Or it can stay connected to the learning, like acting out vocabulary words that we're learning. The whip around is a fun activity that we'll do in some of our longer trainings where students are paired up face to face next to each, or sorry, actually back to back next to each other, and I'm asking some true or false questions. Now, my true or false questions could be tied to the content to keep it relevant, or just completely silly, especially if I see that there's some stress. We need to reduce that stress. And the way this activity works is they're to back, and I'll ask my true or false question. And if you think it's true, you're going to make a T with your arms. If you think it's false, you'll make an X. And then I'll say whip around, and participants will flip towards each other, and they're going to celebrate if their answers matched. And they'll say, oh man, if their answers didn't match. Now, I love this activity because my intention's not that they're getting it correct. They're not having fun if they're getting it correct, at least. They're having fun by just being silly with each other. There's always laughter in the room, even if they matched or didn't. And they're learning along the way. Making learning active also makes it really memorable. So don't be afraid to give those breaks. It helps the brain chemicals replenish. If you've met one person with ADHD, it's you've just met one, right? Just like cold symptoms, impacts vary from person to person. So do ADHD and executive function deficits. It looks different in different individuals. So think in terms of different traits or characteristics. Now, what else can be part of ADHD? Here are some statistics of different disorders and what's known as the morbidity with ADHD. Okay, I'll give you a moment just to look at some of these, and I'll point a few of them out. Right? Learning disabilities, 30 to 50%. That's that's a huge number. Some of these kids are highly intelligent, but also might be compensating so much in the younger years that you don't notice it. Let's talk about anxiety for a moment. This can be the hidden disability. It's likely the statistic is even low, and it's always in the room with them. A lot of what you might be seeing as behavior can actually be unmanaged anxiety. Kids just trying to push things down, push everything off because they can't handle it. We also see oppositional defiant disorder, 40%. This is less prevalent with ADHD in attentive type, typically more often seen with the hyperactivity type. Potentially results of the emotional dysregulation, or sometimes when the parents don't have the skills, they don't know what they don't know. That's when we can start to see more challenges with opposition, which is part of why parent coaching and support is so important. So be aware of that quiet student. You don't have to be hyperactive to have ADHD and to have impacts. Impulsivity. By the time I think about what I'm going to do, I already did it. Ready? Fire. Oh, I forgot to aim. They don't always consider their past experiences in the moment of action. Now, what else impacts learning? Let's talk about stress. This is the gatekeeper to learning. Negative emotions like stress, pressure, anxiety, etc., increase the hormone cortisol, which dulls cognition. The prefrontal cortex turns off, right? That front part of the brain where all our executive functions live. And what happens is the rapid reflexive responses of the amygdala, that back part of the brain, turn on. That's where our emotions live. What happens is the brain goes into survival mode. And what happens next? What happens in survival mode? We most commonly hear fight, flight, freeze. Some newer terms our fib. Right? Do you ever hear kids or maybe even yourself say some white lies to get out of a stressful situation? Or fawn. This is when you escape harm in the short term by learning to please the person threatening you and keep them happy. What happens in survival mode is no learning can take place. No problems can be solved, and empathy becomes difficult. One way to help kids is by teaching the language of emotions. This is a great tool called an emotion wheel, where we have those core 6 emotions in the center, that fear, anger, surprise, happy, disgust, sad. But when we expand outwards of the wheel, we see that there are so many more words connected to our emotions. Help students name their true emotion so that they can understand what they're feeling and therefore be able to take better control of their responses. We say, name it to tame it. All right, building emotional self-regulation. It's the power of self-talk. The things that we say to ourselves really matter. What can I do when I feel overwhelmed? How can I cope or deal with self-doubt? What about when I'm feeling anxious? How can I deal with that or my depression feelings? What are helpful mantras that I have? Where can I post them? Maybe just on my desk calmly or in my learning space. Things like, when I stay with it, I finish. I can deal with this frustration. This won't last forever. So help kids find some tools for when they're feeling these big emotions like frustration. When we're feeling frustrated or upset about the way things are going, it can get tough to keep our emotions in control. But frustrating situations will happen. What we can do is help make them feel more manageable by having some strategies to help us manage our emotions. We call this self-regulation. So this is a tool with some suggestions of different calming ideas. Kids, kids can mark off maybe 3 to 5 tools to self-identify what's going to help them when they're feeling some of these bigger emotions. The key here is that we're doing it in those moments of calm. Because in calm, that's when our best learning can happen. When we can proactively consider what's going to help me. Excuse me. I'm just going to take a quick sip of water. Now, this is just a list of suggestions. Can come up with many more. And this might be noted on like a little index card that kids have. We practice it in those calm moments. Now, let's talk about medication. What do ADHD medications do? So, ADHD medication stimulates the underactive part of the brain related to executive function, increasing the levels of dopamine and norepinephrine in that part of the brain. Medication can help with improving focus and attention regulation, improving working memory and processing speed, reducing hyperactivity and impulsivity, irritability and obsessiveness, help to reduce disruptive, aggressive, and non-compliant behavior, lead to greater acceptance by peers. Now, why might that be? Because of all of the above. Reduce the risk of future drug abuse. Kids might self-medicate if they're not getting the support with something else. But caution that pills don't teach skills, okay? They just make it easier to learn and regulate while the medication's in their system. These are tools. Medication can help reduce the gap between intentions and actions. Now, how long have ADHD medications been around? You might be surprised to learn it's actually since 1937. Now, we talked about a lot of the benefits of medication. It's also important to understand some of the side effects and understand how some kids feel on medication. Often no impact, no appetite. What is the impact of having no appetite? Right? Say, for example, a student in high school is on the sports team. They haven't eaten all day because they haven't had an appetite. And then they go right into their sports training. How are they feeling when they come home? What is the impact this is having on their body? Or the social comfort around that appetite aspect too. They're in the cafeteria and they just don't want to eat. Are they socializing in the same way? Or the social comfort of their friends knowing? Are they worried about others knowing that they're on ADHD medication? How about the impact of their medication wearing off? Right? They come home at the end of the day, their medication's worn off, they still have their pile of homework to do, but do they have the capacity to do it anymore? I say this all to say that there is a real impact and challenge of medication and a lot of benefits. I think as teachers, it can sometimes feel frustrating when parents aren't considering medication, when we see a student who's really struggling with the impact of their ADHD. And we know that this is a tool that can likely really help them. Medication is a complicated family decision. It's not our job as educators to talk about medication, but it's important for us to understand it and to have that understanding with whatever decision families make. We also tend to see performance inconsistency. He packed up his backpack perfectly yesterday, but he didn't do it today. What's our assumption? He must be lazy or unmotivated? But that's not what it really is. ADHD is not a problem of knowing what to do, but rather doing what they know. The when, where, the and how, not just the what. ADHD is disorder of performance, not necessarily just skill. Students with ADHD are often very bright, yet they can be chronic underachievers. And there's often a discrepancy between ADHD and performance. Closer look at executive function. Research found that 25% of the explanation for performance on all kinds of measures, including IQ tests, is predicted not by how much you know, but by how you demonstrate what you know. That is the strategies you use to take the test or do the assignment. So would love to hear from you here. What is the implication for students with ADHD executive function deficits here? So feel free to drop some comments or questions that you have in the chat. What do you see as the implication for students with ADHD and executive function deficits? Feel free to jot something down for yourself if you don't want to share, and that's perfectly fine too. I'm just considering maybe some aha moments you're having, the impact on these executive function skills for your students in the classroom. Please rephrase the question. Sure. So, so what we're hearing here is that there is such an impact of how you demonstrate what you know, right? So it's about the strategies that you use to take a test. The executive function skills have such a great impact, more than intelligence. So knowing that, how do we see that impact in the classroom and how kids can perform? Right? So Hallie says a test may not be an accurate measure of their intelligence. Exactly. Yeah, any other thoughts here? Reminds me of how much we need to not only differentiate learning, but also our expectations and how we think a student should demonstrate their knowledge. Yeah, it's that demonstration of knowledge. Can we give kids different opportunities to show what they know? These tests are not about mastery of the subject matter, but of the strategies to answer the questions. Yeah, thank you. Really great thoughts here. So let's kind of bring it all together here. Look at the impact of executive functioning on learning and performing. Now, here's a math question. It says, Sarah has to be at school by 8:30. It takes her 5 minutes to brush her teeth, 10 minutes to shower, 10 minutes to eat breakfast, and 25 minutes to walk to school. What time will she need to get up? Wow, there's a lot going on here. Let's think about our different skills and how they're coming into play. Initiation and activation. Okay, I need to get started. Do I have my tools ready? Do I have a strategy and a routine of how I'm going to start with this question? Attention. Ooh, that's a blue shiny balloon. That looks cool. Oh, Sarah. I have a friend named Sarah. Now, I'm attending to this, but am I attending to what I need to? Working memory, being able to keep different bits of information in mind. Do I remember, okay, yesterday my teacher was talking about elapsed time. What did I need to do to be able to solve this problem? Can I access those skills in my memory and apply them here? Planning and organizing. There are a lot of steps here, and the order is going to matter. Can I prioritize the order with a structure? And flexible thinking. This is a multiple choice question, and my answer is not on there. Do I have the ability to come back and try again, to take that feedback and adapt? Processing speed. It takes time to process and respond. Okay, you have 10 minutes to do this. It might take me longer to get started, it might take me longer to work through the question, despite my level of intelligence. How about self-monitoring? What am I telling myself? What are those things that I'm saying in my head to help me regulate my feelings, my behavior, and my actions? And emotional regulation. It's just not working out. That answer wasn't on the multiple choice. Am I going to tear up my paper, get out, and give up? Or can I use some of my frustration tolerance strategies? Take some calming breaths, maybe take a break for a minute and come back to it and try again. Oh, and by the way, you have 5 minutes to complete this, and it's a pop quiz. What's happening to my ability to perform now? That balloon bursts. Not going so well. How about the impact of external incentives on motivation? Now, the research is clear. Rewards or imposed negative consequences can be useful when the task is clear, basic, and the work or performance is within the student's expertise and control. When the student is response able. When there's not excessive stress or pressure, even if it's from within. When incentives can build routine and habits and develop muscle memory. Rewards, however, can be detrimental when the task calls for cognitive or thinking skills that may be weak in the moment. Incentives can lead to poorer performance by shutting down thinking and adding stress and pressure to already taxing situations. When wanting to teach skills and build relationships, that's when rewards can be detrimental too. When we offer a student a reward as an incentive, but their struggles are due to lagging skills, they may end up feeling bad about themselves. Furthermore, they may also feel that the adult granting or denying the reward doesn't fully understand or believe in them. Consequences and motivational strategies make possible whatever is possible, but they don't make the impossible possible. They still have to be response able. Rewards or threats of punishment may actually shut down performance by adding stress or anxiety. Now, one more thought about rewards. With rewards, people often only work to the point that triggers the reward. So if I get a prize for reading 3 books, why read the fourth? So our balloon here represents the cognitive space that a person has in their brain for their executive functions in the moment. So imagine they have this full balloon, and this is the amount of space that they have to use their executive function skills in the moment. But then they might have a smaller balloon. That's the amount of space that they have to use their executive function skills that's weaker in a moment. But remember, it has nothing to do with their intelligence. It's our goal as teachers and as adults and supports to keep this balloon inflated as much as possible for our kids. Now, what messages do our students tend to hear from school, friends, family, outside activities, very well-meaning ones? Maybe that they're annoying, unmotivated, lazy, controlling, too much trouble. Let's take a look at what this experience might be for the child. Now, this is a doodle, and I know it's a little hard to see. I will read through it all. This is a doodle of a very intelligent seventh grader with ADHD. We're going to focus in on the bottom right corner here. It says, "School sucks." The funnel to the brain of the student with ADHD. We see a funnel with different letters, some that are inside, some floating outside, and the teacher talking all of these different things. At the bottom, it says, on that big funnel, it says average funnel. And then the ADHD funnel is a lot smaller. And it says some things just don't fit. Why is this happening? Because the very well-meaning teacher might be giving these messages. Care more, sit still, do it my way, work longer, deal with your boredom, try harder, focus just here. But what is the kid dealing with? Working memory deficit. They have a 30% developmental delay, attention regulation challenges. They have limited time for their interests in socializing. They're also a creative thinker. They have slower processing speed. Their neurotransmitters are underactive when they're bored. They also have an internal motor going and they're curious. The image on the outside represents the chaos that is going on in the brain for these kids. Do I get partial credit for simply having the courage to get out of bed and face the world again today? So it's all about how you frame it. Now, I would love some of your participation here. I'm going to go through the first few of these on the orange on the left side, and I'd love for you to help me reframe it with a positive. And feel free to just pop some things up in the chat. So the first one says hyperactive. How can we reframe some of these? Yeah, full of energy. Absolutely. How about this next one? Strong-willed. Yeah, determined, assertive, persistent. I love it. Active. Yeah, tenacious, passionate, fabulous answers. Okay, how about our daydreamers? Imaginative. Yeah, they're a thinker. Visionary. Awesome. Maybe they're creative. How about daredevil? Yes. Risk taker. Maybe they're adventurous. We'll do one more of these together. Aggressive, passionate. Yeah. Or protective. I love that. We might also say assertive. Knows what he wants. Yeah. I'll post the rest of these up here for you to take a look at, right? Questions authority. Is that independent thinker? We're lazy. They're laid back and relaxed. Argumentative. They're persuasive. Manipulative. They delegate well. Makes a really good lawyer. Impulsive. Spontaneous. Bossy. Can be signs of leadership. Distractible. Those curious out of the box thinkers. Hyper focused. They can be really productive. And our slower processors, those deep thinkers, they can be really detail oriented. ADHD, oops, ADHD is not a failed version of normal. Now, the right side is looking pretty good, right? Would it surprise you to know that jail has a disproportionate number of people with ADHD? Now, this is our opportunity to work towards decreasing that school to prison pipeline, where instead of students getting the support that they need, they're getting suspended, detention, or even kicked out of school. That's why I'm so grateful that I get to go into school districts and speak to teachers just like you and do these talks. Because I know that as teachers, you're in this profession because you care. And I know that you'd rather find the ways to provide students with the tools and services. Would it also surprise you to know that if this was a room of entrepreneurs, we would also have a disproportionate number of people with ADHD? Because look at all the skills here and all of the skills that it takes to be an entrepreneur. Now, here we have some role models. These are people who talk about having ADHD, not just ones who we assume did. Now, I'll point out a couple. Damon John received an award through IDA, the International Dyslexia Association, a few years back. He talks about how six of the six sharks in Shark Tank, four of them have dyslexia. It could be a different brain type. As with ADHD, so many benefits. All right, I will end you with that on that positive note. Are there any questions?
So there were a few that came in, and one of them kind of talks about that the question around having children kind of self-monitor their behavior. I think, when you were talking about fidgets and other things, and to be able to advocate for themselves. And this person says, could you please share more about the cognitive level or developmental age at which a child is most efficient at self-monitoring and redirecting their behavior, in particular when there might be two disabilities, such as, say, autism and ADHD.
Okay, so what developmental age they're able to
Yeah,
do
most
some of that
efficiently be able to,
self-monitoring?
yeah, do some of that self-monitoring. Mhm.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if I can speak to the exact age when that happens. With anything, it's gradually growing over time. Um, and we know that when there are these impacts of ADHD or other things going on, there is going to be more delay than their peers. And so supporting kids with strategies as we see that they're needing them. I know that's not a perfect answer, but I'd have to look into that more to know kind of a more specific age. Great question.
Okay. Can you also talk more about executive function and it being more predictive of career versus IQ? Or maybe some examples.
Yeah, so what we saw in that quote a little bit back is that we know that there is that greater predictor of success with how we show what we know, with the strategies we use. And those strategies come in with our executive function skills, right? A lot of those strategies are those ability to use our executive function skills to manage our organization and planning, to, the processing speed we have, the ability to regulate our emotions. All these things have a huge impact and then on how we're able to use our intelligence.
Great. Another one was about fidgets, and I kind of was curious about this too. How have parents or other professionals or other adults reacted when you talk about fidgets in your classroom? I just wonder how you handle. I know that sometimes some adults can say they just need to pay attention. They don't need something in their hands, right? Um, and then I love that. I love that never occurred to me that, some direct instruction on how to the two students on how to, appropriately use a fidget. So I think that to me, that was kind of like mind blowing because it just didn't occur to me, which is kind of like, but some adults do really kind of discourage the use of them. And, how have you handled that or have you encountered that?
Yeah, no, great question. And I definitely see a variety of this with teachers that I work with. What I do find, and this is why I spend such a good amount of time, even in these shorter presentations, talking about fidgeting, is when we can have those aha moments of, oh, it can make a difference if I directly teach kids about this. I do find that teachers are more willing to give it a try when they see that it's not just they give a kid a fidget and they don't have control, but they can give them that tool and still have a lot of boundaries and control with it. And I find that teachers once they have that knowledge are more often more willing to give it a try. Not to say it's for everyone, some teachers still may choose not to offer it, but I do find they're more willing to give it a chance.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it also is a sign for kids, depending on the age of kind of a mutual respect, right? Understanding like I understand that you might, you need this, but we all have to work together here. And so here are some strategies you can use to make sure you're using it correctly and not in a way that's going to distract you or others, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that thank you. And then the last question was, as special education moves from a deficit-oriented model to a strengths-based model, what are some strengths that we can highlight to describe youth with ADHD instead of highlighting their deficits? And we kind of did some of that reframing. Um, but in particular, I'm thinking around that list, the one that really I wonder in terms of youth is that one about daredevil, risk taker, especially when you start talking about adolescence, right? That's not always framed well to be a risk taker when you're 15, right? Um, but so how can we highlight the strengths that youth in particular would have instead of those deficits?
Yeah, great question. I think we have to focus on the value of helping kids see these reframes because when students start to feel these negative things about themselves, when they're hearing them over and over, we know that it has a big impact on them. So how can we change the script and use this language so that they know that we also really believe in them? And at any age, yes, I hear what you're saying, that a 15-year-old who is this daredevil or risk taker, really adventurous, may have some challenges in the classroom. But can we highlight what they're doing outside of the classroom in amazing ways? Or maybe they're a risk taker in the classroom with doing something in an out of the box creative way that another student might be nervous to give a try. I think that the more that we can focus in and talk to students about and notice these things that they are doing can have huge, huge benefits.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's really important. Sometimes as adults, we forget that, as kids grow and develop, that they too have significant capacity to know themselves and that some of our job as adults in relationship with them is to help them um, frame that knowledge in ways that are strengths. And because I think, like we talked about with the little kid in the cartoon of all the different messages they're receiving, right? They may have received all those negative messages all these years. And so helping the student learn how to reframe is also really important, I think, in supporting them. So thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for today, Carly. It was really, really insightful. I know I, as a both as a professional and as a mom, really found this just mind-blowing at every turn. It really helps me understand the young people in my life. So I'm really grateful that you were here today. At this
Thank
point,
you.
we're going to move forward to kind of finish up the webinar with some housekeeping. Um, so if we could, Amy, move the slide forward, that would be great. Thank you. Okay. So if you have any questions or lingering thoughts or ideas, uh, you can use the contact information on the slide to contact Carly and the team at PTS Coaching and visit their website. There's also a QR code there if you would like to sign up for their newsletter. That's also available on their website too. So, as we kind of finished talking about youth and adolescence a little bit, I mean, we were talking about kids of all ages, but towards the end there, really thinking about adolescents, we would invite you all to join us in August and September for the Academy. The Academy is an annual event bringing together military family service providers from multiple disciplines to address a topic important to the military family readiness system. This year, we'll be bringing together experts and professionals like yourself to address key challenges facing military youth well-being. Over the course of 6 weeks, OneOp will deliver a series of professional development opportunities, including an expert panel discussion and webinars. Visit the Academy website using the link on the screen or that will be placed in the chat momentarily. And now for the discussion on continuing education or certificate of attendance. So we offer several different types of CE credits and always a certificate of attendance for general use. To receive both of the or either of those items, you have a two-step process that includes an evaluation and a follow-up survey of some kind, depending on the type of CE you require. So you will complete the evaluation. In a moment, I'll give you the link to the evaluation. You'll complete that part. Then you will be prompted to select additional links for the type of certificate you might need. And then it's after you complete that second step that you should receive a certificate in your email within 24 to 48 hours. Some email providers may send that certificate to your spam or your junk folder, so please check there if you don't receive it. If it's not there within a day or two, you can email us at ce@oneop.org and we can help you track it down. At this point, in a moment, I'm going to put the link to the evaluation in the chat. You might need to copy and paste that link into the browser window. Sometimes it'll launch from the chat, but sometimes you might need to copy and paste it. For those of you that are watching on demand, or if you need to come back later to complete the CE process, that link will be on the webinar event page. There'll be a purple button like the one that was on the screen, and you just click on that and it'll take you there. If you get an error message when you try to access any of these links, please read the error message. Sometimes the website might be blocked by a user setting or firewalls. If that's the case, you need to contact your IT department for assistance. If you still get an error message, take a shot of it and send it to us in an email. For questions regarding to CE items or access, you can email us again at ce@oneop.org. And I've just placed the link to the evaluation into the chat. We'll stick around so that you can grab a hold of that. And I will also put our email for CE questions into the chat as well. Be sure to visit us on our website at oneop.org to explore upcoming events, articles, resources, and more. You can also find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We'll stick around, like I said, for a few minutes for those of you who need to get links or information. And we thank you all again for attending, and thank you, Carly, for presenting, and we wish you all a pleasant rest of your day.